Hello, everybody. This episode of Virtual Orchestra is called... Ew! What's that sound? So when we're first learning to play with our bows on the strings, I usually like to have people play the middle of the bow to the middle of the gap to start out. So what that means is I call this the gap. And so you're going to use the middle of your bow first. So find the middle, it's kind of hard to see here, but find the middle-ish area of your bow and put that onto the middle of the gap. And that's where we're going to get the best sound. So that's the first part of this video. Now, today we're going to talk about, ew, what's that sound, right? So these are common mistakes that beginners may be making, and this is going to hopefully give you a way to identify which of the sounds is causing the problem. Like, what's the problem? Well, I should say, what's the problem causing that sound? And we're going to go through each one today. As you're watching this video, I want you to listen to the kind of sound you're hearing. When I'm demonstrating these top few problems that people have, listen and see if the sound that I'm creating is the sound that you're having problems with. If you can identify the sound, then maybe you can tie that back to the correction of the problem, and that's going to help you the best. Okay, so before you get started, you're going to want to make sure that you have your best bow hold ever, which is going to be a different video. If you need help with that, let me know if you need help right away. But most of you have already learned how to hold your bow correctly. And I just want to remind you, you need to make sure that things are curved, your thumb is bent, and it is in the corner, not in the cave, not sticking through. Okay, all the good bow tips that we've talked about. Make sure you have a really good bow hold, because if you don't, then you can do everything else right and it's still going to sound awful. So make sure you have your good bow hold, okay? So let's talk about bow hold real quick. You need to make sure you have your good bow hold. What happens if you don't? This is what happens. Let me show you. I'm going from my good bow hold to show you some yuck. Let me stick my pinky straight, stick my thumb through. Ew, look how bad that looks. Ew, that's a really bad bow hold. Okay, I'm gonna have a lot of tension. I'm gonna squeeze really tight. Got a lot of tension. Let's see what kind of sound we're gonna get, even if I do everything else right. Yikes. Please have a good bow hold when you're practicing these tips. Thank you. Okay, so the first problem may be what we just talked about, the middle of the bow to the middle of the gap. So if you're putting your bow too close to the bridge, you're gonna get a sound kind of like this. Ew. So scoot away, get back to the middle. The opposite problem is also true. If you're playing too far over the fingerboard, you're gonna it's gonna be just too light sounding. And it doesn't necessarily sound super bad there, but it's not your best sound. So you're gonna wanna make sure that you have it in the middle of the gap. Okay, so the next issue would be if your bow is going straight across the string or not. If you're making an X, bad. If you're making an X this way, bad. So we want to make sure that we have it straight across the string. And I'm trying to get the angle right here because the video is making it look a little weird. So you want it to be like a T, a perfect plus sign. And then you're going to play. If you're too skewed this way, ooh, that's real bad. Or this way too. If you're too far this way, it's going to slide around right even over the bridge perhaps and make a horrible, awful sound. So make a perfect plus sign. You may need to stand in front of a mirror and kind of look and see if you're making an X or a T. You want the T, okay? So double check. You can check yourself in the mirror for that problem. Okay, the next problem deals with the pressure of the bow or the weight of the bow. So when you have your bow on the string correctly, with the angles correct, but you're still hearing a bad sound, it could be one of these sounds. Here's the first one. You can even see how my bow's scooting around. It's just scooting all over the place and it doesn't sound good. Well, I'm not putting enough weight down with my bow. So I want to pretend like my bow and my strings are magnetic. And so my bow is just going to stick onto the string, stick on there, and they're going to be suctioned together kind of like a magnet. And then when you play, it doesn't scoot around and it makes a better sound. Now the opposite is also true. If you put too much weight or too much pressure with your bow on the string, it's going to make a really bad sound too. For example, okay, I'll stop. Yes, see, that's a bad sound. And that means there's too much weight. My bow is moving so slow and there's so much pressure that the string can't ring. So we're gonna lighten up. I want you to think, if you hear that sound coming out of your instrument, I want you to think of letting your bow be light like a feather. And that should help your sound with that issue. Another common problem is when your fingers are touching the string and you didn't realize that they were, and you didn't intend for them to touch the string, but they're just hanging out and they just kind of gently are touching, barely touching, not even pushing hard enough to make a note, but they're just barely touching. That screechy sound, get your fingers up. If you're playing open strings, take your fingers off the strings to make sure that your strings can ring without being touched. Now, when you start using your fingers down on the string while you're playing, another common problem is if your fingers don't push down hard enough on the strings, if they don't hold the string down tightly enough, you're gonna get a bad sound. Now, when we used to play pizzicato, it would sound like this. Hear how it just kind of pops, and if I push my finger all the way down, much better. Same thing with bow, only the bow makes it a million times worse. So here's the note we want. But if I'm not pushing down firmly enough with my fingers, ew, right? No, push down firmly, firm fingers. Much better. Okay, I have saved the worst problem for last, and this is the one that's the hardest to identify, because when you have this problem, you can play a song, but there's just this awful sound. You're doing everything right, but there's this awful sound coming from your instrument and you don't know what it is. This is the problem. It's called, dun dun dun, bumping other strings. Yeah, so you've got to tell your bow only one string at a time. So let's get back to Mary Had a Little Lamb. Simple demonstration here. I'm gonna play it only on the D string. Okay, sounds good. Now let me show you what it sounds like if I'm bumping another string. Right? That doesn't sound good. But so you have to notice if you're hearing another string. Something that makes it even worse is if your fingers that are on your D string are also barely touching A string like we talked about just a second ago, then it's gonna make the sound even worse. Ew. So bow, only on the D string, please. Happy practicing, everybody. Good luck with these tips. I hope this has helped you. And if you're having a sound that maybe I didn't describe, go ahead and shoot me a note and I can see if I can help you, okay? Have fun.